as someone who sits on millions of data points around what this actually looks like, how bad is it really?
It's often very related to the state of the economy. People that don't have jobs, don't have their basic needs met, they're turning to crime. Aura is an emergency response platform that enables anyone to access the closest vetted security or medical response anywhere, anytime using a connected device. We've partnered with the best-in-class response providers across the country to enable them to respond to these individuals in an Uberized fashion. We found a way to give these security and medical response providers an additional way to earn money.
Going back to that whole point around scale, what is your scale now?
I mean, we service over, I think it's close to like 1.5 million customers in South Africa now. So that's actual end users that have access to Aura's service. When we decided to launch in the UK was we had caught wind that the police had basically mandated that they were going to stop responding to low priority events, such as alarm systems, until they were verified.
Hello and welcome back to the Founder Files. Today I'm talking to Ryan Green, the co-founder and chief product officer of Aura. Now, if you haven't heard of Aura, they are scaling at an absolute rate of knots outside of South Africa, across actually, I think all continents in the world, but particularly into the UK and the US. Now, this is exactly what we speak about. We speak about how Aura managed to get to 1.5 million plus users in South Africa, changing the face of the security industry and the emergency first response industry, how they had to completely change the value proposition, the problem that they were solving in the UK and the US, because the nature of crime and safety in developing countries versus developed countries is actually quite different. And so they've had to adapt and evolve as they do that. We talk a lot about their products, but specifically managing complexity and how they have to adapt to so many different types of customers and ways that they use the product versus how they now simplify that for their different customers. And obviously this debate between users and customers as well. And then we just really talk about managing complexity and scale and everything from how they've really redesigned their business, how they manage their team internally to handle all of this complexity, the fact that there are so many different customers and types of customers and products that they have within their ecosystem. And then on top of that, we get quite macro. We talk about crime, we talk about safety, we talk about all the data that they have on the country and get his view and opinion on what crime and safety is like in South Africa. And obviously in between that, much, much more. Just about how Ryan thinks about leadership, how he thinks about how he's changed as an entrepreneur, and just what it's like now moving past the 100-person mark and having to develop leaders underneath them. So Aura is in a very interesting and exciting place in their scaling chapter, and that really is now scaling not only internationally, but really fully moving the co-founders into like full strategic leadership positions. So kind of what they've gone through to get here and how they're approaching the next chapter. This is everything that we discuss. And if this is the kind of content that you're into and you're not already following or subscribed to the Founder Files, then I suggest doing that now, because this is the place where we get into real, honest, authentic experience shares and stories from founders like Ryan, who are really scaling their businesses throughout South Africa and outside of it, but getting the honest, real, unfiltered truth about how they're going about doing it. So if you want to get those lessons and to help you scale your business without years of trial and error, then this is the place, right? This is the podcast. This is why it exists. So make sure to like, subscribe, or follow now. Now, I'm sure I've got you on the edge of your seat. Let's get straight into Ryan's story. Welcome to the Founder Files, the podcast that's like eavesdropping on a conversation with a successful entrepreneur over a fireside chat. Join me, Cameron Coutts, through this unique experience of unfiltered stories and insights from scaling founders around the globe as they share their ups, downs, and everything in between. Ryan, welcome to the Founder Files, man. It's great to have you here, and the Aura story and how many lives that you've saved since you've started the business is a really epic one, and so I'm excited to share it. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Cam, and good to be here and excited to share the story too. And I hope that the listeners enjoy.
So, as per usual, the way that we always start the conversation, if there's anyone here that doesn't know you, doesn't know the story, just a bit of context on Ryan and also Aura as a business.
Yeah, so I'm Ryan, 35 years old, grew up in South Africa, mostly in Cape Town. But I started my kind of career and journey in the work world in Johannesburg, where I actually started off in the security industry from the very beginning. So this is all I know. And I met Warren, who we co-founded the business together. I met him in about 2017. And essentially, sorry, 2000, actually a little bit earlier, it was probably about 2015, 2016. And I was actually, working for his original business, which was a security business, did offsite CCTV monitoring using a AI analytics filter, which flagged unusual behavior to the CCTV operator. And off the back of those kind of alerts, the operators would try and dispatch somebody to go out and, either intervene in the crime that was taking place in the property or to go and just act as a deterrent. So that business was the kind of platform for how Aura started and the problems that we identified that Aura now solves. And yeah, we essentially started Aura in 2017, very early in 2017. Started a little bit of work on it back probably on the latter part of 2016, but the official business started in 2017. And essentially, the problem that we set out to solve was to create a platform where people could access emergency response more efficiently than the traditional solutions out there. And we also wanted to make sure that the actual service was way more effective and much faster than people were used to. So typically, accessing armed response was quite a manual process where a lot of phone calls had to be made. um, the human sitting in the control room was making a lot of the decisions about who was the closest and who should go. And there was no technology driving efficiency around that service. So it was very, very manual, as I mentioned. And so we set out to create a platform and a technology that created more access, gave more people the ability to access these services, not just a few that could afford armed response at their home or at their business. We wanted to make it accessible in a way that people could use it on tools that they used in their everyday lives, so cell phones, and accessing this on an application. And we wanted to make it faster. We wanted people to be able to get help and to really make an impact on the emergencies that they were dealing with. And I guess the kind of other aspects to the solution and what Aura does is that people are not just sitting in their homes and need protection around their properties. They're actually out and about and they're living their lives. And South Africa notoriously is quite an unsafe place. And we wanted to give people the ability to access help anywhere, anytime. So if I were to describe what Aura does in a kind of like elevator pitch, we'd say that Aura is an emergency response platform that enables anyone to access the closest vetted security or medical response anywhere, anytime using a connected device. If you break that down into the various pieces that I spoke about, we put a tool in people's hands that allows them to get help more easily and more efficiently than ever before. And we've partnered with the best in class response providers across the country to enable them to respond to these individuals in an Uberized fashion where the closest can go and they get remunerated to provide that response. And so we found a way to give these security and medical response providers an additional way to earn money on top of their kind of core business services that they would be selling outside of the Aura relationship.
That was slick. One would assume that you've raised hundreds of millions of rands from investors in terms of pitching that. So I can see the practice coming through, man. But that's crystal clear. Um, on that note, give us a sense of where the business is at now, right? I mean, like you obviously started in security, you've got EMS involved as well. There's B2B, there's B2C, you're in like multiple countries around the world. Like, yeah, if you had to kind of just explain the where the business is at right now, how would you?
Yeah, so I mean, it started off, as I mentioned, as a security response service, quite quickly progressed there where we needed to offer medical response. That happened because we were receiving a lot of medical requests through the security service that we were offering, where people were pressing the panic button and requesting medical response. They just, in that moment of need, they saw Aura as the trusted solution and they put their faith in us. And we kind of we were faced with trying to solve emergencies in real time, even though we didn't necessarily have a contracted medical service in place. And we just used that as like a demand lever to start. We identified that as like a demand lever and started realizing that we needed to bundle medical response as part of the security response service because they kind of go hand in hand in terms of under the emergency umbrella. And we could see that, both in South Africa, at least, both accessing police and public medical services were both not as efficient and as good as they needed to be, and people, they needed an alternative. So it quite quickly progressed into us offering medical response. And actually, what I didn't mention earlier around, Aura as a solution is a lot of people kind of immediately think to some of the safety brands that they're aware of in the market, like Namola or some of these other safety apps that they might be familiar with, and which are quite prominent and popular in South Africa these days. Um, and we actually made quite a concerted decision in the beginning of the business not to create a B2C product that people could download. So Aura from day one was positioned as a B2B solution that we would sell onto businesses that would enable those businesses to offer the service to their customers and to their staff. So we were B2B from day one and servicing customers like Uber, that had a requirement to give their drivers and their riders a safety service whilst they were on trip, anywhere in South Africa. And so we've always been a B2B business offering the service to the corporates so that they could enable their customers and staff to be able to have this protection service.
Okay. And I'm curious now about your positioning yourself as a marketplace. And as you go on your websites, and besides the immediate thing is look at the significance of our reach is the first thing that's obvious when you go on the homepage. But when you go under products and check out marketplace, underneath marketplace, what do you mean by that? Like, why is this a marketplace of offerings? Like, you went from something that's really quite a panic button, right? Just through software in essence. Um, at its basic fundamental of where you started. Yeah, help me understand how this is a marketplace now.
Yeah, well, I think we took a lot of inspiration from businesses like Uber quite early on, where we identified that, there was quite a high demand for emergency services. People, South Africa is obviously a country that has a lot of safety concerns. And so there's a high demand for these types of services. Um, the problem that we identified was access was an issue. So there was no easy way for people to access this. They had to go sign up an armed response contract in their area, and that only protected them around their property. So we knew that there was a need for the service, and we knew that there was supply. And there was a ton of armed response and medical response companies that existed across the country, from national providers to small little independent operators that operate a small area of South Africa, a small suburb or small region of South Africa with a couple of vehicles. And so the marketplace kind of concept is quite straightforward in the sense that we act as the platform that connects the customer that wants to protect themselves and that wants to have a solution in an emergency to the providers that provide that service. And we do that through a completely tech-enabled platform or a tech-enabled solution. And we essentially make sure that the customers that come on board get the right service by ensuring where we have the right supply in place in the areas where there's either customer demand or where there's emergencies that we need to facilitate. And not to say that we wait for emergencies in particular areas to see that we have demand there. We obviously have to have coverage everywhere where we know that we're onboarding customers and that our corporates have individual users that are, in those areas. We've built a solution that, leverages these resources that have idle capacity that also service other customers that aren't Aura customers. It doesn't mean that because we don't control those resources and that we're leveraging their idle capacity, that doesn't tell people that there's no guaranteed service and that they might press that button and not get help. And that in actual fact, what it means, well, what we've done to counter that is make sure that we partner with more than one provider in areas across the country so that we're never dependent or reliant on just one company and their vehicles. And that if they are busy with something else, that it fails over to other providers to still get a response. Quite similarly to, if a driver declines a ride on Uber, it will fail over to other drivers. We built that capability out with just different service providers so that we're never reliant on one company to accept a call. As we scale number of users in particular areas or across different accounts, that we're able to deliver the same response. As we scale the number of users, we get the same response times or faster response times by lots of different strategies, from using AI tooling, to deliver a better, more seamless experience, to optimizing the way that the actual platform and the technology works, are identifying and locating and dispatching the responders that actually go out and help people.
So I can imagine there's multiple revenue models and business models that you have within this, right? I mean, because my understanding was what this evolved first into was essentially a white labeling, right? It's like, here's the software, here's the tool that you're going to use within your operations. Now there's multiple options. You've got the B2C offering, you've got the B2B approach. If you had to just segment this down into like, what are those different like business and revenue models? How would you explain that? I just want to understand how you get paid.
Yeah, cool. So, and I mean, we can also come back to that question around where Aura is today. I know we didn't kind of we didn't fully answer that, so we can come back to that one a little bit later. But essentially, Aura's model is a subscription-based model where the corporate pays us a subscription for every active user. And it's quite similar to an insurance model where people pay to have that protection or to have that access. And we don't necessarily charge people as and when they're using the service. We give them the ability to connect to and get access to the service, and it actually covers them. Their subscription covers their usage. So people don't have to pay for responders to actually come out. And I think that that's been one of the challenges for the end user that's buying this product that we've had to solve over the years, is that they don't like the idea of hidden costs, or the potential that there's going to be additional costs that come out of using the service, especially on the medical side, where people are quite frightened of costs that they're not aware of in the moment, and medical costs can kind of spiral out of control. So we've essentially found a way to make sure that people get access to the service, and they get the ability to access the service through their subscription, and they're not paying any additional costs to actually get somebody out to help them in the emergency, and to, if it's a security case, to de-escalate or deal with the security emergency. If it's in a medical case, what we offer is basically a stabilization and transportation to a medical facility. That's the service that we offer customers, and that's all covered within their subscription.
Okay, so I just want to unpack that a bit more directly. When you're talking subscription on the B2C side of things, is I'm paying one subscription, and is this some kind of exclusivity to certain like EMS providers, to certain security providers, or is it more about the fact that the subscription or the premium that I'm paying to either my medical aid or the monthly cost that I'm paying for my security and on response, is this something that would be then added on to my invoice as an optional extra that I can also utilize Aura services, or is it something that's already baked into that offering that security provider is going to onboard me into? I think maybe like let's separate the security and the EMS because there's the slightly different need there. I just want to
Yeah.
because I just want to understand how that fits into the customer's invoice.
Yeah, so it's actually completely separate and not contracted alongside security and medical services at all. This is a completely separate service that would be offered through your insurance company, through your bank that offers an Aura product. So all of our customers, and we can quickly discuss some of the industries that we service. So we've got insurance clients, we've got clients like Uber and an e-hailing service. We've got big tracking companies on our books. We've got banks that offer our service to their end users. And essentially, this is something that they take up as a value-added service, or an offering that insurance company, bank, or e-hailing service offers them, that is completely separate to any potential armed response or medical aid contract that they have. This is completely separate. Armed response typically would offer you the ability to have your alarm monitored and responded to by that contracted company for your property that's contracted. This service is a personal safety solution that you are able to use out and about anywhere in the country, that may get a response from the company that provides your armed response if it's in the area
But
that
the
they
point is, it's
operate.
whoever's closest. It's not
Whoever's
about
close.
any kind of cam.
Exactly. You're not contracting with any particular response company for the service. You contract through the organization that's offering this, that's contracted with Aura, and we facilitate you getting help through any of the partners that are on our network, any of the response companies that are on our network, that are contracted on our network.
So if I just want to make sure I'm following, so there's the model there's B2C, the B2B2C, which is essentially this one is it's about personal safety. Whoever's closest to you, doesn't matter who the company is. It's about them being onboarded onto that. And the point of them the additional revenue stream that's unlocked for whatever the emergency responder is about the fact that if you happen to be closest, you're the one that's going to get obviously paid for that service. That's just that's the aggregation happens on that back end. But then on the
Exactly.
B2B side, is it's more about the fact that you are going to be a SaaS subscription for all the users that you onboard, and it's specifically going to be utilized in your environment. So in terms of where we get charged, it's a typical paid for number of seats, and you get them to utilize this. And would that specifically be for, I'm still just, again, putting myself in the shoes of someone who I've luckily, touch wood, never had to call an ambulance. But I do obviously have an armed response provider. I think most people in the country do. So for me, I'm just thinking about getting that. Yeah, I'm trying to understand how how the B2B solution works. The B2B, the B2C, B2B2C. I'm quite clear on if my summary was clear. Did I get the right picture there? Let me just pause there before I continue.
No, I'll reiterate it again. So a typical customer for Aura in the personal safety use case. So this is our South African, our most prominent South African use case, which we call personal safety, which is the idea that people can get protection in emergencies, whether security, medical emergencies, anywhere in South Africa. That's typical customer of ours is offering Aura's service as either an embedded part of their offering to their customers. So if it's an insurance company, they might embed this into the short-term insurance that the customer takes out from them, as a nice little additional value add that they're giving them, or they upsell this solution to their customers and make some money off of it. They see it as a revenue driving opportunity for them to offer a service that people want and that they are comfortable getting from the insurance provider, as an example. So we contract with those corporates in that way, where they basically pay us for active subscriptions that have access to this service. Now, for the end customer, they might think they're getting this service from the corporate that they're contracted with. So it could be branded as Outsurance Panic Assistance or F&B's Guard Me product. But we're the back end provider of that service, which is made aware to, the customer knows about this. And we obviously have, from a marketing perspective, we've co-branded the solutions as much as we can, so that this is powered by Aura. And that Aura has become this kind of stamp of excellence in the space, where if you're taking up the service through an organization that's offering it to you and it's got the Powered by Aura stamp on it, that you trust that this is the best in class service that you can access, related to this type of panic on demand panic service or panic experience. So that's the that's the kind of model to our corporate or our customer. And then, as I mentioned, the different organizations either embed this into their package for their customers or for their staff. Some offer it to their staff as a benefit for working at the organization, where they want to show them a duty of care and offer them this type of service. So we've got a few corporates on our books that offer this to all of their staff and some of their family members. And we've had some amazing stories where we've saved lives of family members of the staff member that had access to this, and they were just offered this purely by working for that organization. And then the alternative is that people use this as a way to build a revenue stream for the business, where they offer this at a fee, and people can subscribe and pay for the service, as an add-on to their offering. And then we've got a couple of businesses that are standalone safety solutions in South Africa, prominent safety solutions, safety apps. Like I mentioned, Nomola's probably one of the most popular or the most well-known safety apps in South Africa, where you can go into the App Store, download Nomola, and you can subscribe for their premium offering called Nomola Plus. And that is essentially it allows you access to private security and private medical response when you press that panic button, and that's delivered through Aura, powered by Aura.
Interesting. Well, you mentioned Namoda earlier as if they were a competitor, but now you seem to now you've working directly with them.
No, they're a customer of ours, and have been since day one. And in terms of the story where we made that clear kind of decision not to go B2C, we identified that there were already quite a few of these safety apps in the market when we started. And we saw that the challenge that some of them we felt that some of them were having was building the customer base and delivering the service and building out that network to deliver the service simultaneously. So we made a distinct call to go back end to build the platform that would enable all of these different solutions to access or to offer and then be able to deliver that response service. And we've stayed true to that ever since, where we're a pure kind of like platform play, enabling all of these different solutions to offer this out to their customers. And then on the supply side of things, just to kind of close the loop on the model, is we go out and identify these best-in-class response companies, and we incentivize them to join the platform and provide these services to our customers. And they earn additional revenue off of that existing cost structure that's on the road already. So those armed response or medical vehicles are already on the road. They're already staffed. There's obviously very expensive resources to keep on the road and to keep running. And we just bring them additional revenue on those vehicles. So we use the idle capacity in a sense, and we just bring them additional revenue to service, and they get a piece of technology from us that goes in the vehicle. We call it our in-vehicle responder device, and that enables them to go on duty and when they're available or when they go on shift. And if they're in the vicinity of callouts that our algorithm identifies that they're available for, then they get pinged and they can accept those calls and earn money off of that.
Interesting, man. Yeah, I think you've clearly made a huge impact on both the security industry, but also in the emergency medical services space, at least in South Africa. Going back to that whole point around scale, right? So, what is your scale now? There's a clear breadth. Yeah, I'm curious about size.
Yeah, I mean, we service over, I think it's close to like 1.5 million customers in South Africa now. So that's actual end users that have access to Aura's service through these different contracted customers of ours or corporates that offer this on. And so that's kind of grown very nicely over the last couple of years. And we then, the kind of on scale on the journey of growth, we started growing into other markets in 2020, actually in COVID. There were a few opportunities that came our way during that period, which I think, we're obviously very grateful for. And a lot of businesses didn't have that sort of fortune or luck during those times. But safety is one of those services that, like in testing, trying times, it seems to be an industry that just grows because people still need to be protected. And when times are tough, crime increases. It's like it's quite like a common equation where if economies are struggling and unemployment is on the rise, crime and safety issues grow kind of like proportionately with that. So we were afforded a few kind of opportunities during COVID, particularly through one of our customers. I'll mention them, Uber, where we were servicing their safety SOS solution in South Africa, and they had similar issues in Kenya. And they said to us, "Can you guys go and replicate what you've done in South Africa in the Kenyan market?" And we did a bit of kind of like desktop research, established there was a existing security, private security industry that was quite similar to South Africa's private security industry that existed. And we said to Uber, "Great, we'll go and we'll go and do exactly what we've done in South Africa. We'll go build the security and medical response network, and we can turn the service on for your drivers and your riders." And we kind of went off and did that. It helped a lot to have that kind of like clear cut use case that we had already solved for in South Africa to go and grow into a new market, because it meant we didn't have to go and kind of identify and prove our product market fit. At least to get into the new market, you always need to have product market fit in a market. You can't have one customer that you're servicing, but it was, I guess, the fuel that allowed us to like go there quite easily and know that we had contracted revenue from a customer that we could funnel into the network so that they were earning money and they were responding to customers from day one. And we weren't just selling them on a dream or a story. And then there was a platform to kind of allow us to go and sell this to other customers in that market. And having that brand behind us, that customer brand, to say we're the response platform behind Uber, was a massive kind of feather in our caps, because most people at that stage, Uber was one of the fastest growing businesses in the world. And if you kind of if you were connected to them in any way and you were servicing them, you were seen as a business that was serious and worth working with. And it helped us with a lot of kind of other customer conversations so that we could go from 1 to 2, or 1 to infinity in those other markets. So Kenya was the first kind of growth market for us outside of South Africa. And luckily similar dynamics, that meant we didn't have to change too much of the platform to be able to go and launch there. We obviously had to contract and make sure we had the right like legislative stuff in place, because security is quite a you need to like work within the bounds of the law within the security industry. And there's certain certifications and legislation that you have to follow. But it was quite easy to do that sort of business in Kenya. And so, that was a nice kind of entry into new markets and into the idea that this is a platform and a solution that there was a need for worldwide, not just in South Africa. And so that really opened our eyes into starting to look where else we could go and where else there was an opportunity for what we'd built and what we were kind of creating in a country like South Africa.
Cool. I'm going to leave that on a beautiful cliffhanger because I want to go micro and macro at the same time. Yeah, there's 3 things I want to unpack, man. Instead of just laying them out, I'm going to go with the first one. What is surprisingly complex about your business and about your products and technology that most people wouldn't really understand or appreciate if they didn't ask the question?
It's a good one. Look, I think the fundamental solution is pretty simple to understand, but what is complex about our business is that if you use the example about Uber, they've got drivers that are pretty much providing service to their platform. And that's their kind of, that's their main source of that driver's main source of income, is they go on duty and they service those customers that have ride requests. We're contracting existing emergency service providers that already have a customer base, and we're delivering additional call outs to them that they have to facilitate in and amongst their other kind of client opportunities that they've got. So one of the, I guess, challenges that we've had to solve over the years is how do we ensure and guarantee a response through those providers that are not contracted directly and purely or solely to Aura. They've got other clients that they service. And so we've built over the years an incredible ability to make sure that we've always got supply to service customers, and we found a way to incentivize and make sure that responders go out to these individuals that have emergencies in record time, even though they've got other potential customers that they're servicing or that they're contracted to. And that's something I think that's quite unique because, we're leveraging those resources. We're not contracting them directly and solely. And our objective is to have made this attractive enough to them that they see this as an opportunity that they want to actually, they see as a way to drive more revenue for their business. And it's an exciting way to drive more revenue. And it's not something that they see as a headache or as an additional thing that they have to worry about every day. That's not bringing them much value. So, from day one, we've tried to be a value add to these companies, but the challenge has been in making this work within their existing business operations that they run day to day. And I think that makes us quite unique, and we've created quite a moat around that. I'll share a few details around that, how we've done that. One of them specifically is that we didn't tell guys to go and download an application on their own devices that their responders could use to request call outs or to respond to call outs. We actually provided a device inside the vehicle that we pay for. So we funded a device that goes into every security and medical response vehicle that always has data that is always working. If the device breaks or dies or it gets stolen, we replace it. And so we've made it very easy for these guys to run the service in their operations, and they never have to worry about the logistics of that device. We've got it covered, and that's been a moat that we've created for ourselves, which Took obviously years to kind of like build out and to get right. Um, and and yeah, I think that's one of the complexities. I think one of the other kind of like complexities is that we don't just have one way for somebody to access help in our ecosystem. So we don't just have an application endpoint or an API endpoint that people can integrate with to offer the service. We've got the ability to white label an application for customers that want to run this as a standalone app that they don't want to build themselves. We can white label and build an application for them. Um, we offer a phone call solution for individuals that might not have smartphones or that prefer to phone in an emergency. So they would dial a number that we set up and they get the experience of accessing our platform, but through a phone call as opposed to pressing a panic button on an application. We've got physical panic buttons that we've connected to the platform so people don't have to pull their phone out and go to the app and press the panic button. So we built out a whole host of different ways that people can access Aura, that makes kind of, you know, maintaining the platform and how we actually offer this to clients a lot more complicated and complex. We're not just supporting one type of access modality, as we call it. We're supporting several. And the reason we did that was we found that no two customers are the same. And they've got different makeups of customers that are their customers. So some might be contracting a lot of elderly people, and an application is not going to be the right thing for them. So if we just supported an application, we probably wouldn't have done deals with those organizations. So we kind of like listened very closely to what the market needed, and we realized that population is made up of all different types of people with access to different technologies and different um different buying power, and we need to have a solution that can cater for all of them. So somebody, even if we use the phone call product as an example again, we needed to find a way to make that toll free so that people that didn't have airtime, regularly didn't have airtime on their phones, could still phone that number in an emergency. And so not only do we offer a phone call product for those that prefer to phone in, we offer a toll free option where the end user doesn't actually pay to make that phone call. So there's a lot of complexity within that kind of sales side and how people get access to this that makes us quite unique. It's not a standard one product fits all scenario that we work with.
That makes perfect sense, man. The like visual metaphor I have going on in my head is almost like an hourglass shape. Is the fact that like as you say, all those access modalities that you have is like it all will funnel through like one kind of source and then get externalized into
Exactly.
different providers and situations.
Yeah, it's brilliant way to visualize.
But then the fundamental principle of like what you're building is that if you want extreme speed in emergency response services, you need like radical convenience on both the user's side, but then also on the provider side as well. And so I think that principle is like you know, those scaling stories that often happen in hindsight in terms of, sure, do we like is in the moment the challenge of is like, yes, do we completely build a new front end for this and a completely new way of doing this for someone else? Just to add some more complexity into this. And it's like always fighting those decisions. But like the key golden thread throughout that is that if we're not making it more convenient and accessible and easy for people to access medical services, we're not actually living our entire purpose as a business. And so just that kind of that funneling approach means that you are taking the complexity, you're taking the time, you're taking um, the friction away from the two most important stakeholders in that, and that's the person who's in an emergency and the person that can support them in that emergency. And you have taken all that complexity on to make that happen. Your example of the actual devices in those vehicles is a perfect example of that. Is even because the complexity there is not even the value prop's very simple. It's like, do you want to optimize your downtime and achieve and gain new revenue from that? Perfect, right? You've got your existing ways of communicating and responding. This is an additional feature on there that if there's downtime, there's potential revenue to happen there. But the point there is the complexity and difficulty of that is the change management and like having to get onboard that train, everything like that. And it's like, I'm going to take that away because that's not your core business and plug that in. But again, using your own examples and going around, but really it's that fundamental point of is like, how do we make this as convenient as possible for anyone? Because if we do, it's going to get used.
Exactly. And like, when we went to these security companies in the beginning, and I'm saying just security companies because that's where we started, it was the same is true of the medical response companies when we eventually launched a medical service. We went to them and we sold them on this, future that where the solution was moving and the direction of the industry. And, there were the early adopters and those that they could see what we were describing and they could see the future and they bought into the vision. And there were a lot of them were like, we've worked this way for decades and, we love working this way and we're going to continue working this way. And this new piece of tech that you're asking us to start using, you got more chances. You got very few chances on us taking that on. And so if we went to them and said, you know, you, we've got this great opportunity for you, but in order to benefit from it, you're going to have to fund your own devices, which they didn't have in their cars at that stage. It was a big lift. And so, to your point, we made it as convenient, as simple for them as possible. And what we were trying to do early on was show them capability or excellence in that thing working. So the device needed to work all the time, and because they needed to buy into that tool living in their operation long term. So if that thing died and the phones didn't work, or there was never data, or stuff was crashing, it would never have got traction. But we were focused around making sure that that experience of putting the device in and turning it on and waiting for callouts was always working seamless, and that was the first kind of like tick box for these companies. Okay, these guys have sold us on this concept; it actually works. We call it I can't think of the word now. Not phantom. We drove like call outs into the marketplace so that they were responding to things that were not necessarily real emergencies, just so that they could see that this thing worked, that the technology works. We drove blood through the system in a way that allowed them to kind of like learn how it works, respond to a few call outs, see that it's actually real, that it functions the way that we told them it would. And and then, eventually when real call outs came, they were bought in and they understood that, they knew what they were doing at that stage. So that was quite a calculated decision. And I think on the other side of it, to the customers, if we just, and this was a hard lesson that we learned, is that you fall in love with what you build first. So you build this, at that stage it was apps. Everyone was building apps, an app for something or an app for anything. That was the name of the game back in kind of 2018 to 2022. Like that's all businesses were doing, was just digitizing their offerings and giving customers a way to access that via an app. And we were very much on that train where we were, supporting app integrations. We were offering a white labeled application, and it took us. We had a few kind of interesting conversations with people that were not customers, and they were not end users, but they were consultants that we were speaking to that were telling us that we were potentially being a bit too one-dimensional in our thinking of how the end user wants to access the service, and that there was a whole multitude of people out there that all had a unique or a different way of wanting to access the service. And if we were really going to achieve scale and speak to that kind of wider audience, we needed a tool that everybody could buy into and everybody could access, that made sense for them. And so that kind of led some of the product strategy, which I've been very close to and been involved in, around what types of tools do we support for the end customers and why do we support them, and making sure that whether you're phoning in to report an emergency versus pressing a button on an app, that experience is as seamless as it can be and that it always works. And that once it's in our platform or in the marketplace, that experience the customer gets is as consistent as possible, whether you're using an app or whether you phoned in or whether you pressed a physical panic button. We're trying to make sure that experience is as similar or as consistent as possible, and that it's not like one is better than the other. That was a fundamental focus point from a product side, is making sure that whatever you were using to access Aura was always the same and best experience.
Epic. It also makes me think about a fundamental principle that I think applies to product strategy, and that's the human behavior is very difficult to change. And so you really have two options. It's about the fact that like you can either create the product in a way that you know it's the best way to do it, and you have to solve that in your onboarding to get and your value prop in your sale to get someone to actually utilize this and change their behavior to get there. Or you just change your product to meet their behavior where it currently is. And if you can do the latter, you're almost always going to get better results than the former.
Yeah, I think, luckily, I think we are all users of this product. We're all potential, users or benefactors of this product, being civilians in a country and we all have safety needs, and we all have needs in an emergency that need to be fulfilled. So I think that helped initially to kind of think through the solution that we were building and how we were building it out. But you're right, you've got to be able to meet the customer where they are. And what that's tricky when you're dealing with corporates that all have different types of customers, and they all engage their customers in different ways. And so half of our half of what we've been doing or a big focus of what we've been doing over the last couple of years, is making sure that we're streamlining that experience for customers, no matter what type of customer you are. That, if you onboard customers in a unique way to a different corporate that we're working with, that we don't have to build out complete unique tooling to enable that we've got something that works for all of those cases. So we've been streamlining a lot of that experience, from onboarding and signing up for the service to actually accessing it in an emergency. That makes us able to work with any corporate, and um, and get customers onto and using that product as quickly and as efficiently as possible.
Epic. Ryan, I want to zoom out now, but like zoom out. Let's just keep it on South Africa now, and then we'll use the segue into the more global growth as to chapter 2 of this conversation, or chapter 3, wherever we are. But you must have so much. I'm saying this like I don't know this already. You've got a lot of data, right? Not only on these industries, but like at a societal level, stuff that the governments would value, right? Um, Talk to me about that, man. Talk to me about what's surprising about some of the insights and data that you have collected. And yeah, I want to know what's surprising about it, and also what's frustrating about your ability to use or not use it.
Yeah, it's a great question. So we have built up an incredible data pool of not only emergencies, but just an understanding of how the industry operates, and where people are good and where people are bad. And although we use a lot of that to drive how we improve the offering and how we provide a better service to customers, we haven't kind of segued into starting to use that data, or to kind of like build out revenue streams of that data. Um, the truth is that what we really want to try and do with it is use it to be more predictive and proactive in what we do. So using that data to deliver insights to our customers, to help them not need to use it in an emergency, to actually avoid situations, and to give you use that data to give them insights on the tools that we're already giving them, so that they can engage with our product more often, not only when there's an emergency, so that they can actually understand, like, where's it safe to go, where are other people having emergencies that I should be aware of if I'm frequenting those areas. So that we had to build up this database, or this data pool over the years, and we had to also understand like what data we can use and what data we can't use. And the truth is, like, what we're trying to do now is figure out what types of things make sense for us to use this data for. So are we going to use it purely just to optimize our service and our experience, or are we going to use it to help reduce and predict crime? And I think that we're leaning probably more towards the latter, because I think if you look at like crime stats in South Africa, at least, I think people don't realize that they're only looking at reported stats. And although those reported stats tell you quite a lot about what's going on, and you can see, year on year, like, changes within those stats, what it doesn't show is people that are not reporting incidents. And what we believe about our service is that people are starting to report certain types of incidents on our services or on our products, and not necessarily always going and reporting it at their police station or reporting it to those sorts of through those sorts of channels. And we want to try and bridge that gap between the data that we have and the data that the public agencies have, so that we can build a more kind of holistic picture around what's going on in South Africa or any market that we're operating in. So kind of working more closely with government agencies around the private side of this industry that holds a ton of data. And where we uniquely positioned is that, we're dealing with emergencies across the country, across different segments and sectors, and we've got data around, emergencies being responded to by a whole lot of different areas, whereas individual security companies, as an example, might only have detail about stuff happening in their area. And so we're much better positioned to go to governments and say, look, we've got a holistic picture here of what's going on. And how can we facilitate the work that you guys are doing with the data that we have, and vice versa. And actually this year specifically has been kind of quite groundbreaking for us in terms of collaborations with government agencies and policing and government ambulance agencies that we've been working very closely with, that are firstly using our technology to better deliver their own services. So they're using our platform to better optimize how they respond to emergencies. And we're now able to start engaging in those conversations with them around the data that we have, that we're building up around emergencies happening in the country, that we can help facilitate how they even, potentially put their vehicles on the road, or where they put officers, or where they put ambulances to help deal with the types of incidents that are being reported. So I'd say, like, we're closer than ever before to realizing like a relationship with government agencies in South Africa, and we're building up that capability to work with them. And as I say, we've got some real nice live engagements with government agencies that are using our platform and benefiting from it now, and benefiting from the data that's coming out of the use of that platform. We now are trying to move into a world where we take this data that we have and find use cases for it that make sense for, firstly, the customers that are on the platform that are benefiting from our service today, so that they're not just thinking about Aura as a panic button that they use in an emergency. They're actually getting more value from it day to day, and also using that to kind of like help government agencies better understand what's going on at a macro level in the country around emergency services and emergency incidents.
Dude, yeah, I absolutely love what you guys are doing. I mean, I did before even having this conversation, but speaking to you more is like the impact that you are now, because of your scale, because of your traction and momentum. It's not just around individuals and businesses. It's not even industries. You're actually able to have a real impact on two of South Africa's biggest problems, and that's safety and crime. And you're at that scale now where I can see that happening in the next couple of years of you really having a solid impact and significant change in the country. And I can imagine that's very rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I mean, we were trying to do this from the beginning. We didn't hold out and try to engage with public agencies and try to, have them hear what we're doing and learn about what we're doing and find a way to collaborate with them. But I think we've reached that point now where I think the solution is trusted. People are putting their kind of lives in our hands with this service, and we're producing results. We saving lives, we preventing crimes from taking place, and the word's getting out there, and people are aware of who we are and what we're doing. And I think it's now just happening naturally, where I think a lot of these government agencies are being tasked with finding ways to deliver what they do more efficiently, more cost effectively, and to use technology. I think any organization in the world today is thinking about, like, what is their technology strategy, and are they ahead of the curve, or are they behind the curve? And I think like emergency service agencies are probably front and center on that like technological journey, where they have to kind of move forward with the times, and they have to be using and leveraging technology to help them deliver what they do better. And we're quite nicely positioned. And what makes us kind of quite unique is that we offer two different opportunities to these government agencies. We offer the ability for them to leverage this platform that we've built for themselves. So as a standalone technology that allows them to dispatch to emergencies or respond to emergencies more efficiently and better than ever before, we can enable them to do that. But we can also enable them to access the private sector services more efficiently, if they want to leverage those services to help them respond to certain types of events that they just don't have resources to respond to, or where they just deem it as non-priority. And that's kind of a segue potentially into what we do in the UK and what we're doing in the US, where the police have stopped mandating, or sorry, they've mandated to stop responding to low priority alarm events. And they basically, it's created a gap where the private sector is having to now kind of fill in and respond to those types of requests that police used to respond to. So what I'm saying from the South African context or perspective is, we offer these government agencies the ability to access a private service alternative that they can rely on for incidents or incidents that they can't facilitate because they don't have the resourcing available, or for incidents that they identify as low priority that they want to save their resources from responding to, that private sector can fulfill, and we can deliver that experience to them, because we've got a nationwide capability, we've got a trusted, vetted network of private responders, and and we've got the results to show that we're saving lives and we're helping prevent crimes. And I think that's a great story that we've been able to build out. And we're now, you know, in the UK and the USA, that's just more prominent as a problem that we are solving. Where South Africa, private response was an alternative to police response. Not the police are changing their mandates and private is now filling that gap or starting to fill that void. There was always quite a distinct separation between private services and public services in South Africa. And we were focused on enabling access to the private services and making sure that more people could access that, and it was better than ever before. And now police are buying into that story and seeing that there's value in that for them.
Cool. Now that we are on the process of segueing into this conversation, I'm going to still leave this cliffhanger on its fingernails right now, because I've got one more question I want to ask, seeing as we are at a very I was going to say 30,000-foot view, but it's like we're actually almost like satellite view now.
Yeah, I actually want to, before you go there, I just want to make one other point around the data, which I didn't make, which is, I think a lot of people have come to us and said, well, why aren't you doing more with data? And why aren't you investing in a data strategy to, turn this into a revenue stream for the business? And the truth is that we have been quite kind of conscious of focusing and not getting distracted on too many different things. And I think this is one of the lessons that we've had as a business, which is there might be an obvious thing that you can do that people are, that people keep telling you, this is a great thing that you guys should be focusing on, and why aren't you doing more in the space? The truth is, if you try and kind of do everything that everybody tells you should do, you're going to get distracted and you're not going to see any of your goals through or your visions through. And although it's an obvious thing for us to start putting time and energy into, and it makes so much sense, we've been focused on kind of building out our core capability and making sure that this is in enough people's hands before we start kind of segueing into other revenue opportunities or revenue models that or even business models, but for that matter, that might be distracting to what we're trying to achieve, as a core platform. And I think we're kind of at that introspection point now where it's unavoidable that that's something that we start investing in now.
I'm not sure what your purpose, mission, or vision statement is, but I can imagine there's something along the lines of making the world a safer, more crime-free place. And just using that as a quite simple marker is what is the best strategic decision for us to pursue that right now? It's not actually leveraging data or insights or starting some new offering there. It's actually just increasing our scale and reach as quickly as possible. Then we can leverage that. And I think that's again the why it makes focus easy, even though everyone out there is like, dude, you got this opportunity in front of you. And I'm like, we're playing the long game here.
Yeah, and also we've got a captive market and audience now. So if we start wanting to deliver more insights and we want to start finding ways to be more proactive and predictive around the service that we offer, we've got that captive audience that's already trusts the brand. They already have access to the service. And if we can start driving better insights to them now, it's only going to add value to the offering that they already have. And I think if we'd gone about it the other way around potentially, or try to introduce that a bit too early on, we might have lost sight of solving for the core kind of function, which is like when somebody has an emergency, are they protected and do they have a tool that they can get help, and does that work?
So the very left field thing that I wanted to ask is that I don't know if you've experienced this as well, and I think this is less so a South African thing and more of a global issue. But when we were kids, right, parents are fine to let us go, like walk around the neighborhood, go to the park, do whatever, and go outside. It was kind of like literally like, please get out the house, right? In other words, safety wasn't such a. I mean, safety's always been important, but like back then, they felt there was more freedom, there was more lenience and autonomy. Now in modern days, that's less so than ever. Like people are monitoring their kids more than ever. People are more conscious of safety and being alone and like not going to certain areas. And the world feels like more of an anxious place when it comes down to safety. And so I just share that anecdote because one thing I'm very curious to know is, as someone who sits on millions of data points around what this actually looks like, you know, how bad is it really? How bad? What is the? Give us the realistic view of what safety and what crime looks like in South Africa.
Yeah, as I said earlier on, it's often very related to the state of the economy. And you've got to just look at any country in the world at the moment, and if you look at the state of the economy and you look at their rate of unemployment, you can directly kind of correlate that to what's happening in their crime statistics. Because people that don't have jobs, that aren't don't have their basic kind of like needs met, they're turning to crime. um, and South Africa is obviously quite notorious for having crime syndicates, and very established and very well run crime syndicates. But there's a lot of kind of opportunistic crime that takes place, and I think that you probably find now that there's a lot more people kind of moving into the opportunistic crime side of things, which to the end person being affected doesn't really matter. Crime is crime. Um, but I think you have to look at like South Africa and see where it's at to know that like crime is not, even though these solutions exist, where people can get help, crime is on the rise because the country, economically is not in the best place. But what I would say is that, South Africans are very, very good at kind of understanding that this is a reality here, and very good at knowing that they have to do things to kind of protect themselves, and they have to be conscious and aware. So, you know, I've always told people, I've lived in Johannesburg for 12, 13 years now, and touch wood, I've never been affected by crime, but it's something that I'm conscious about. I think about all the time. Um, I don't do, I try not to put myself in situations that I know are going to get me in trouble. And I'd say like what, where I think people need to apply their mindset towards crime in South Africa at the moment is not putting themselves in situations that are just going to get them in trouble. And it's based on the opportunistic criminals. Um, Not everybody's going to be impacted by crime syndicates. And, I think those crime syndicates, we're talking about like cash and transit robberies and ATM bombings and all of those types of like high level crimes. We actually provide services to some ATM companies where we provide a response to an alert from the ATM when they're busy trying to rob the ATM or blow the ATM up. And we're actually doing some incredible work around like preventing some ATM bombings. But what I'm saying there is like that's not impacting the everyday South African. Um, and the, the the truth is it's around us everywhere. We're just, as a South African, you have to be aware and you have to like be conscious of what sort of situations you're putting yourself in. And I think having Aura as an offering or as a solution is it's great to know that you've got something if something goes wrong, but people still need to kind of take control of their own safety and their own security and not put themselves in silly situations. And I think that that's sometimes what people forget is that they don't realize that you've got to be street smart in this place. And you can have, response is only going to get there as fast as it can get there. And what people need to do is try and avoid the situations that are going to get themselves in trouble. Um, and what we'd like to try and get towards a world where people can report incidents or things that they're seeing so that we can get responders to prevent crimes from happening ahead of them actually taking place. So that these opportunistic people that are loitering around and that are quite obvious to spot, before they commit crimes can be stopped in their tracks before it's actually taking place. So, but to answer your original question, I don't think it's at a place where we should be more concerned than ever. I think, crime is bad in South Africa, and that's, it's the same as what it was 5 years ago, and it's the same as what it was 10 years ago. I think people now have more capabilities to kind of report crimes and get help in an emergency than they ever have before. But what we always prescribe is try not to put yourself in those situations, because this is a response product at the end of the day, and response can only get there as quickly as you activate it or you're able to activate it, and the responders are able to get out there. And we're delivering like across the country average of like 5-6 minute response times on the security front and under 10 minutes on the medical front, and that's amazing. There's nothing else like it out there, but doesn't stop a crime from happening. And so I kind of like, to kind of like half answer your question, I would also say like people, as much as this is an amazing product when you need it, people need to also take security into their own hands and try and be more kind of proactive around how they live their lives in a country like South Africa so that they're not being caught out.
Yeah. No, of course, man. And I think it's where I was actually going with that is trying to ask you the impossible question um, of how dangerous is South Africa actually? Because it's more just that gap between when are you conscious and aware and street smart, as you put it, versus paranoid. And it's like having and knowing what reality is helpful to bridge that gap. But I also do acknowledge that is a quite impossible question for me to ask you.
Yeah, no, and look, I think paranoia is a good thing in a country like South Africa because it means that you're aware and you're thinking about it and you're trying to, you're realistic about the risks. And I think that paranoia in the past, you weren't able to channel that anywhere. Like you weren't able to phone one or like a local emergency line and consistently get through and report something that you knew you would get a response at the end of it, even if you wanted somebody just to drive by and just check that the area is safe. I think with a service like ours, people can now do that. There's, you press that panic button or you phone that number, you connect with an operator within 30 seconds, guaranteed. It's not like a matter of whether there's availability or whether the call center can handle it. You will connect to somebody within 30 seconds. And if it means that you're just saying, look, I'm seeing somebody suspicious here, and our operator says, great, we'll put that out to our security network and let them just do a patrol around the area and just make sure that that person is not somebody of that's suspicious or known to us in the area that's been causing crimes. So we have that ability now to give people that channel to reach out to and to report incidents that might not be crimes taking place. That could be things that are potential crimes that have yet to happen. But they've got a guaranteed place to be able to channel that now. And I think I think South Africans being paranoid makes us quite unique around how we deal with crime. Like from all the different CPFs and groups around, communities, I think it's a good thing. We now just want to be that central point that receives a lot of that information and decides what to do with it. And where it's not yet a confirmed crime, we're better positioned to deal with that than the police are, because the police need to save and um, protect their resources for dealing with real emergencies and real crimes. And you could argue that, the policeman should drive around and go and question the suspicious person. But the realities are that there's not enough resources to deal with the volume of requests coming through. And we've got a great alternative that people can leverage now. So
Okay, cool, man. I want to now I want to understand a bit more about your geographical growth and expansion, because I'm imagining that and I'm very just curious about how you would start segmenting the different markets that you view now, because the way that you describe South Africa, Kenya to be quite similar is just because of the nature of private, like places with private security, where there are relatively quite high crime statistics, versus countries where there's lower crime statistics, but the problem is slightly different. And right, really, that's more about what the public service can provide, and it's about those gaps within the private sector. Would you say that as like the simplest categorization possible, those are the two like main markets that you operate in, or are you seeing that there's different patterns in different kinds of countries?
Yeah, we've kind of segmented it in our world in terms of like what we call emerging markets and first world markets, and the problems that exist within those two cases. So emerging markets would be South Africa, Kenya, where you've got very established private security and private medical industries that are facilitating the overflow from, or the gap that's not being filled by the public services. And we tap into those industries to provide a better alternative and a more efficient alternative, um, and in easier access. Then we've got our first world market solution, and this speaks to the UK and the USA, where you know they're still very, very good at providing an immediate response to a verified and known threat or known incident, where they've got a lot of technology that they're leveraging and using, and when they know that there's a confirmed crime or confirmed incident taking place, they can dispatch their resources and get people to scene very, very quickly. Um, where we're facilitating those markets is around the alarm side of things. So South Africa, you'd think that because of the crime problem in South Africa, we have the most number of, or the highest number of alarm systems and monitored alarm systems anywhere in the world. But actually, we're one of the smaller markets just based on market size. In countries like the UK and the USA, and all over Europe, actually, for that matter, the volume of people that have an alarm system that's either self-monitored or professionally monitored is massive. So people are still investing in those markets in security and safety solutions for their personal properties, but also for their businesses. And traditionally, those would be serviced by the police. So the alarm system would go to a professionally monitored company, and they would phone the police and say, the alarm went off here, please can you send a patrol unit by to go and just check in on the property. And
Sounds
uh,
inefficient.
that's inefficient on their resources. But the truth is that as the number of alarm systems has just grown in those markets, the installed and monitored alarm systems has just grown. And you can think of products like DIY alarm kits that people can just order on Amazon and install themselves. Um, and, they're just fielding more and more requests for people to go and respond to an alarm that's gone off. And half the time, those alarms are not real, they're false.
And you got police going there because of a false alarm situation. Is like, this is just that, and then they're actually missing out on real emergencies because of it.
Exactly. And so what happened when we decided to launch in the UK was we had caught wind that the police had basically mandated that they were going to stop responding to low priority events such as alarm systems until they were verified. And what verified means is that somebody had physically gone to the property and had provided a confirmation that there was either a crime in progress, or that a crime had taken place, or that it was not real and it could be classified as a false alarm. And that meant that either the homeowner or the business owner was the person that had to go and do that. And, at 2, 3 in the morning, or when you're on holiday, you can't go and do that. Nobody's going to go and respond to their business at 2, 3 in the morning.
Yeah, and also just from a safety perspective, if someone's like
Yeah,
burgling my business, it's like I'm not equipped quite probably physically from an armed perspective, but like I'm not putting myself in danger just to go verify that. So I just have to deal with the fact that I'm just not going to get helped.
100%. I mean, there was even more. Yeah, I mean, I left that point out, but that's even more relevant that these people are not equipped or geared to go and provide that service, as much as they love their business and what's in it, and and they care about their families and they want to protect them. They're not geared to do that. So that left quite a gap, and we felt like we could facilitate that gap with our offering. And there was we did the research. We could see that there was a big private security industry that existed, but what we did was kind of, again, build out a capability where we contracted all the different companies in the different areas and enabled these monitoring companies to offer the service as part of their package. So they're monitoring, and now they offer response through a private guard response platform like Aura. And we facilitate any one of their properties across the UK or the USA. We facilitate getting a private response out to go and verify why the alarm's gone off. And then if needs be, we we would escalate that to the police and get a much faster police response. So we're actually working hand in hand with the police there, where we're doing that verification, safeguarding their assets or their resources. And idealistically, in the future, we'd like to hand that over to the police in a very tech-enabled way, where if we know it's a verified alarm, that we've gone and verified that's a verified crime in progress, or a verified alarm, as they would call it, we could very efficiently pass that on to the police so that they could respond.
I just want to make sure I'm properly understanding. You're saying that your offering in the first hold markets is actually armed response.
It's not armed response, no. And maybe I misguided us there, but with the term armed response. So in the UK, there is no armed response. The police are not even armed. There's a private guard response.
First response
is what they call it. First response, yeah. They call
Yeah.
it guard response, which is essentially a security company that offers a guard response service with an unarmed guard.
So, because what I'm just trying to follow is that there's in terms of the gap in the market happened because now the police are like there's more alarms than ever because this is more accessible for people to be able to get. There are more false alarms than ever because of this, and this is not something that is best for police resources. So, but there's still the requirement of having, and now there's the requirement of having a first responder confirming that there's a real crime happening. So that means is that there's an existing gap in the market for first responders. And so has that been the birth of a first response, or at least an acceleration of the first response industry within these spaces? And now where Aura plugs in is?
We enable that.
Okay, how?
We enable that to either the monitoring company. So there's these, in the UK and the USA, there's these national monitoring companies, or monitoring stations, as they call them, that contract with customers all over the country and monitor their alarm signals. We enable those monitoring stations to be able to dispatch a guard out to any one of their properties that they deem a guard is needed to go out.
Still with your physical devices that are still in those.
No, so well, the security companies have a device in them that allows them to respond, but we enable the monitoring company through either what we call our dispatch
So
portal.
yeah, monitoring company and first responder are two different companies. It's somewhere like South Africa, they're usually the same, right? And so I think that's the separation here.
Yeah,
It's like
exactly.
there's a okay, so there's a monitoring company, there's a first responder company, and then there's the police, right? Usually they were like it wasn't first responder, it was direct to police. Now there's a first responder company as well, and you're connecting the gap between them.
Yes. So in South Africa, as you pointed out, the company that installs your alarm system that monitors it is also the one that responds. In countries like the UK and America, you can have an installation company that is completely separate to the monitoring company, that is completely separate to the response capability. We enable the response capability, and we partner with the monitoring company to allow them to offer this to their sites so that they get a guaranteed response when an alarm goes off, or when they get a CCTV activation, so that we can verify why those have gone off, and if needs be, escalate to the police. And so we are filling that void that has been growing in those markets where police are kind of digging their heels in terms of not wanting to respond to those types of events. And in some cases, like in the USA, the police actually, they initiate fines to people if they've responded to 2 or more false alarms at that property, where they'll actually now say you'll pay a fine, and that fine can be anywhere up to $150, which is massive. And plus, they probably blacklist you from being able to respond again. or to be able to phone them again. They blacklist that site. So
That's quite scary.
yeah, so there's an obvious
Yeah, screw the fine, man. It's like being able to but like that's the whole cry wolf thing, and it's quite literally
exactly.
like you're not going to get serviced.
Yeah, and they've obviously had to like take extreme measures there because it's all kind of like fallen on their laps to solve or to respond to, and they're just not geared to deal with that, and they need to their resources are needed for other things that are more important. And so we come in as a really nice alternative that works like, if it works hand in hand, we like to say with the police, so that we're helping take care of this issue for them. And we'll do the job of verifying and making sure that they get verified events to respond to that are classified, that have the right sort of paper trail needed, so that if they get called out, they know it's for the right reasons.
So where are you at on the scaling journey now? I mean, you're in the multiple countries around the world. It seems like what's underlying this conversation is that a lot of the focus right now is continuing that growth in the US and the UK. Yeah, what's the kind of priority for growth right now, and what's next?
Yeah, so I mean, the UK story is still very much, you know, we're in that process of like building out that business and scaling that business. And although we protect over 150,000 sites across the UK at the moment, which is quite a nice number. What we're starting to into now is actually, we're calling it like a self-monitored solution, where people that have these DIY alarm systems that they order online and install themselves, like a Ring alarm, or there's a whole lot of different Chinese manufacturers of of similar products, where they could actually contract a guard response service themselves, and where they previously didn't have any monitoring service monitoring that system, they could contract directly with the service like ours, through a ring.com or through an EasyViz. So we're starting to like move into that self-monitored world now, where the end user themselves can contract the service if they want it. Um, and that would be different to the individuals that already have their alarm professionally monitored, that could be getting access to this through the monitoring company. So, that's kind of like the big focus in the UK at the moment, is just expanding out that model and scaling that service. I'd say it's only in the last year that I think we've become like a household name in the UK, where people understand exactly what our offering is, and they understand the problem that we solve, and it's a trusted solution. When you enter these new markets, even though we had like a tried and tested story in South Africa and a proven story in South Africa,
You're
um,
starting from scratch.
starting from scratch, and it's a new brand, and it's new people, and it's new faces, and the industry, you know, is filled with people that have been there for decades, and it's you got to like break your way into it, and there's a trust element there. But we've broken through those hurdles, and we're now kind of everyone's seeing the value of our offering. We've got great customer stories and case studies that we can tell, and so that's growing quite nicely. In the US, we're basically doing that all over again. And we're solving the same problem, but we're obviously, we're using the benefits of hindsight and the learnings from the UK to not make the same mistakes that we did in the UK when we launched there. And we're obviously tailoring the solution to fit that market, because there are some nuances and some differences. The private security in America can be armed, so there's some differences there. America is obviously a country that has a lot of armed individuals, and nothing we're not familiar with, working in South Africa with armed response companies, but there's the differences that you have to apply to the way that you deliver the service, and the risks, and the way that you do that we have to obviously take into account. Um, but we've launched in Dallas. We launched a team in Dallas earlier this year, and we kind of like focused that as our launch market. It was one of the states where the police had mandated that they were no longer responding to alarm systems, and so we saw it as like a nice opportunity to kind of get guys on the ground, speak to customers that were having this issue in those specific areas, and kind of build from there. And we're already seeing I mean, it's not a surprise to us, but we're already seeing the customers that we're speaking to have a requirement outside of Texas, in a whole host of other states and cities where this problem exists for them. So what we're doing at the moment is basically building out our supply capabilities in the areas where customers have the biggest problems, and almost just taking the different customer opportunities that we're having, and like building out a view of where the biggest problems are, and going and focusing and solving that for multiple customers at the same time, and essentially giving them access to this alternative in those areas. So very luckily, we haven't had to build too much more technology to enable us to launch there. A lot of the tooling that we built for the UK over the last couple of years is a perfect fit for that market, which is always a great win if you don't have to, rebuild your platform or rebuild your technology to fit that market. And I guess it's kind of one of the reasons how we choose which market we go into is based on the ease of doing business there, and how easier would it be for us to replicate what we've done. Um, and yeah, I mean, that's kind of like the big focus at the moment. All the energy is going into making sure that we make this work in the US and do it as quickly as possible. I mean, a lot of the funding that we raised in our recent Series B was to expand into the US and to basically build out a capability and a business there.
Yeah, epic, man. Like it's exciting times, but it's also really complex ones as well. And I think that's what I'm hoping to wrap my head around now with the last bit of time that we have left is just like you've got so many different types of customers. You've got so many different like access modalities, as we put it. You've got so many different stakeholders that you're having to connect with. In South Africa alone, you've got your security companies, you've got your emergency first responders, you've got your um your insurers, your corporates, your direct to consumer alarms. You then in the UK as well, those are different kinds of customers. Then we're talking about monitoring. And so just across just your customer interface, just your different types of customers and markets that you're in, the different geographies that you're in, the different learnings that need to be applied there, and then also at a product level in terms of like platform backend integrations, like panic buttons through to apps, through to white labeled solutions. There's just so many variables. So like, how do you handle that from a team perspective? How do you handle from an org design perspective? How do you structure your business to be as like human capital efficient as possible, seeing as you've got all that complexity sitting external?
Yeah, and I mean, it's not an easy problem to solve. I think where we've got it where we've got it right so far is that we built out the team with the right people from the beginning, and we made sure that we invested in the people that we brought into the business, and we try to keep a lot of that as lean as possible, where the people that are responsible for the functions that they're responsible for in the business are the experts at that. They've been involved from very early on potentially, or they've come in and they're so driven, and they believe so much in the business that they just this is their baby. And we've kept it lean enough that we try and not have the variables be a factor of the people that we have in the business. Rather, the variables are the complexities of the solution and the platform, and we use the key people we have in the business to try and optimize those problems all the time. So we don't necessarily have a product team focusing on multiple different things. We've kept our product team quite lean. We focus on our personal safety marketplace, and our fixed location, we call it our fixed location marketplace, which is protecting the properties. And we split it into one part of the team focuses on demand, the other focuses on the service and the supply side of things. And we've kept that very, very lean. And everything that fits into those two worlds is dealt with by those two teams. So we don't have somebody that deals with just the white label application and another person that deals with just the responder application. They deal with customers and servicing customers. And all of the variables that fits into their world. And so the obvious thing that you can think about is that, at some point that becomes too much for certain people to be able to deal with. And we're kind of like reaching that point now where we're obviously expanding the team to be able to deal with just the volume of stuff that we're working on. but we're still keeping it very much structured around those two focuses on customer side and everything that falls into the customer world, and service and supply side and everything that fits into that world. And those two teams work very, very closely together to make sure that the experience is very seamless throughout those two different journeys. But the teams themselves are relatively kind of like lean and simple to manage in that respect. And you know, that's obviously on the product side of thing. We're obviously looking at, leveraging AI capabilities and tooling to help do certain functions and certain jobs more efficiently and better at scale. And I think every business is on that path at the moment, and we're using that, but we're doing it in the areas that we know we don't want to put more people in to kind of scale. We want to focus on using like optimized technology to do that job, and we keep key people to deal with the parts of the marketplace and the ecosystem that we know is best delivered and serviced by the people that know those sides of things the best. And yeah, I mean, it's worked well for us so far. And the other thing that I think is really important about how we've kind of like brought people into the business, into the culture of the business, is people know and understand what it is they're dealing with here. They know that they're dealing with a life-saving platform. So it's quite easy to sift through the noise of things and go, okay, well, if this thing breaks and people can't press a button and get through to us in every scenario, then anything else that comes up is not as important. We've got one fundamental to solve.
Yeah, because people will die.
People will die. Yeah. So we got fundamentals that keep us aligned all the time as to what the focus is. And I'll kind of promise to customers is that if they press a button, they're always going to get help. And we kind of build everything around delivering that. And it's gotten a little bit more complicated as we've kind of expanded into different markets, and we've got different teams that are thinking about things in different ways. But we've kept that kind of central thread throughout the business. And it forms part of how the product strategy unfolds and how we kind of take the ops model and expand that into new markets. So we've really like focused on making sure that we don't just hire too many people to do the job, and that we keep it quite lean and focused. And we've got teams that focus on exploring new things and looking at other ways to deliver what we do, but they sit almost in a way separate and don't distract the kind of core teams from what they're focused on, what they're delivering on. And everything kind of bubbles up in our world. So whether you're in the sales team or you're on the service team, kind of trying to give the best response times, everyone is kind of measured by the KPIs of how many lives have we saved in a given period. And we've got quite a nice formula now that we know how many customers or users we need on the platform, how many call outs need to be coming through that we need to be responding to be able to deliver X number of lives saved, and what does the response time need to be to do that. So we know that formula now, that we need 1,000 call outs from 100,000 customers with a response time of 5 minutes to save 40 lives a week. And we're kind of like optimizing that model all the time. So if we say we want to save 50 lives a week or 100 lives a week, we know what we need to do on the sales side. We know how many customers we need to bring in, and all of the strategies that we take on in the business and all of the initiatives that we work on are all centered around that top line live save and live, and we call it safe spaces created is the other one. So we deal with it in two ways. Live saved is actually saving somebody's life, and most likely linked to our medical service. And then we've got safe spaces created, which is, did we protect a property and stop a crime from happening, or did we create a safer outcome for that individual or for that property that potentially would have turned into something else if we didn't get a response out, or we weren't involved in that equation. And that's how the business is that's how the business operates at a fundamental level. Now it's not as simple as I'm explaining that there's obviously a lot of detail in terms of incentivizing people to think that way. And, we've leaned very heavily into our core values and creating core values, and a culture in the business that people kind of understand what it means to work here, and what people are doing and what they're giving up on. But what we found is that the people that really thrive in our business are ones that connect with that from the very beginning. And they're like, we call them protectors, like people that work here. They've got like this protection mentality, um, that just comes naturally, and they want to help. They want to do good. You know, they, and it just comes through when they're in this business quite easily. And that's helped us a lot. And I don't think, we're quite fortunate that we have that storytelling capability that people can buy into, that culture capability that they can buy into. Not all businesses are that fortunate, but yeah. And that's helped us kind of build out the teams that we have today that operate the business.
So Ryan, like one thing I want to know is, it sounds like things are going brilliantly for you guys, right? You're almost your destiny's in your own hands. And you are scaling as fast as you possibly can. But it's also in a very positive state. So what I want to know is, what's currently keeping you up at night? What are the kind of challenges and complexities or stresses that you're facing as a co-founder of this business?
Yeah, I think one of the natural things that like change is that, firstly, you're working in the business in the beginning, um, and you're responsible for kind of a lot of the output, and you start building teams around you to start facilitating that output, and to deal with the load, but you're still very much kind of like you're working in the business. I think one of the biggest kind of transitions or challenges at this stage is that you stop working in the business as much, and you're working on the business. um, and it changes how you get involved in the different teams that you work with, and the kind of input that you provide, and where you provide support, or where you get involved and where you don't. um, and I think one of the biggest challenges, I'd say personally for me, is just letting, like realizing that the business is at a size that you can't be involved everywhere, and that you have to be really, really kind of like focused around where you put your energy, and where you are trying to essentially unlock and reduce blockers for the team. So it's I wouldn't say it keeps me up at night, but I'd say it's a conscious kind of transition that I think about quite often, is not not thinking about Ryan that used to work in the business, as much, and now thinking about Ryan that works on the business and guides the team and unblocks them and gives them the tools that they need to be able to kind of like do what they need to do. And it's a very different kind of mindset and way of thinking. And um, it requires you to approach like your day quite differently. Like I'm somebody who's very kind of like output driven, and I can put a task list together of 10 things that I want to achieve a day, and I can kind of get that done because it's within my control a lot of the times, or I'm good at like getting a result. But now, you kind of like you you kind of defining a way of people working underneath you and within the team so that they can get the results. And you're not it's not always just about what kind of like tooling you're giving them access to. It's about like how are you guiding them. Are you stopping them from going down a path that's not going to get the right results? And how do you stay close to the details that you need to stay close to be able to do that at a global level? So it's I guess it's like a transitioning phase into doing less of like the output and more on making sure that what output is happening is the right output, and that you're enabling the right output for the teams. I'd say that's kind of, yeah, I'd say what keeps me up at night is probably, it feels like you move a lot faster in the beginning. Um, and like just I think it's just based on the size of things. Just everything feels to happen a lot faster. One win a week, when the business is small, feels massive. Now, one win a week, when you've got multiple regions, it might just be one region that's got a win, and not four regions that have a win. So I think just that feeling of like are we consistently moving at the pace that we should be moving? Is it even realistic? You know, are we moving at the same pace? It's just it's more spread, and it just feels like it's not at the same pace. That's something that I think about quite a bit. And, you have to kind of like temper your expectations around like what's realistic in timelines, um, and how many kind of like things are happening at the same time, or that are on the go at the same time, that mean that things take a little bit longer than they should. And how do we get comfortable with the fact that that's just the reality of a growing business? So I'd say that it doesn't keep me up at night, but I'm always thinking about like, are we still moving at the pace that we once were? Does it feel like we're, you know, like in that, when you're in that like room in the beginning, and you just don't even notice where the time goes in the day, and you're just like, things are just, you're on the phone, and then you're running out and doing that thing, and then you're sending that last email quickly before 5 p.m. so somebody reads it. Like that, like pure hustle is something that I think about quite a bit, because I think that was a necessity to like where we got to and how we achieved what we did, was that pure hustle. And we were so hungry, and just trying to make sure that that's something that's still there, and that's like, but we're doing it in a way that makes sense for where the business is today. It's like hustle, but hustle in the right way. Now, smart hustle, I think, is maybe the term now, because hustle can only get you so far in the beginning. I think now at the stage we're at, you need smart hustle.
Ryan, thank you for sharing your story on the podcast, man. It's been a really stimulating and engaging conversation. The final thing that I want to know from you is, what is the one question that I haven't asked you, that I should have asked you, that you'd like to answer now?
Um, mm, um, Maybe the question is like, how do you stay motivated? I think that's maybe a good question. Is like, year on year, as things get more complex and get more hairy and crazy, like how do you stay motivated, and how do you kind of like, how do you how do you stay motivated? I think that would be a good question.
Well, then what's the answer?
I think personally for me, I keep kind of thinking about what drove me in the beginning, um, and like what it meant to me to kind of be able to create something, and to be involved in something that had, for me, a lot of meaning and a lot of purpose. And whenever the business gets tough, or whenever I start kind of having that, there's many moments where you have that kind of like doubt, or that imposter syndrome, where you go, shit, am I the right person for the business at this stage, or am I still the best person to be doing this? I always go back to that like energy and hunger in the beginning, and that drive. And I remind myself that it was probably much harder to do what we did in the beginning than it is now, when we've actually got something that's we can work off of. We've got like a sculpted mold that we can work off of. We've got a team, we've got money, the business has got revenue, we've got the fundamentals in place. And how do I keep myself motivated is, I keep reminding myself that to get from 0 to 1 took a certain type of approach and a certain type of style to get there. And getting from 1 to 2, or 1 to 3, just takes readjusting and rethinking about that approach, and just growing, I think, continuing to try and like realize that you're growing as well. But always reminding myself that, like, the motivation that I had in the business still needs that same motivation that I was once giving back then. And that's what I kind of like always go back to in the moments where things are the toughest. Is I'm like, it was way harder back then. It was way harder to like stay motivated, and to like find solutions to problems when we had less resources, or less kind of at our disposal. And now it's just like about a mindset shift as opposed to anything else. So yeah, I'd say that would be the one thing. And it does, like, people have to be honest that you go through motivation dips, and you go through times where you're very, very motivated, and times where you need motivation. And I always just go back to like the beginning and always remind myself that this is a privilege to be able to do what we're doing here. And that, one day when we look back on it, I'll always try and think about looking back one day and going, we created this thing and we helped so many people and we had fun along the way, and it was all worth it, even through the tough times and the hard times.
Dude, what an epic ending. Thank you for sharing your story on the podcast. And yeah, I can't wait to see you continue scaling, and I can't wait to do round 2.
Cool, man. Yeah, thank you. I really enjoyed that. And and thanks for having us on. Thanks for having me on.